with that said, yeah, we are going to be going into the legendary saga now. Like I mentioned the previous stream, not quite my favorite, really. Um, I'm not entirely sure what to think about it, but I think at the very least, I have been getting a little bit more appreciation for the saga in general. So that's good. So we're gonna end up meeting a lot of new characters in this saga, which I am actually very curious to see how all the animators design them, and especially our I this is at least what I've seen the fandom call him, our Disney princess. So yeah, with all of that out of the way, I think we can move into the legendary saga. 20 years from the Troy saga. Let's go. Seven years later on Ithaca. Here we go. Is this Gigi? The color reminds me of them. Oh no, it's Duvet. Duvet box. Haven't seen them before. He look. I don't know how I feel about it. Hold on. It's just me, myself, and I don't know how I feel about him. He looks like some kind of very emo, grunge kind of kid. Oh well. We'll roll with it. I'm gonna back up. Yeah, sorry for the pausing. It's just me, myself, and I. Stuck in my bedroom, living in this world you left behind. They are really going for the Disney princess vibe, huh? Is he thinking about Odysseus? Yep. You are. Don't go. Was that a dog or a wolf? I know life and fate is scary, but I wanna be legendary. Oh, they put it in gold. I hate that so much. I cringe every time. Is that Penelope? And all of the suitors. Is that Antinous? Oh. What's the... Oh, interesting. Hey, Athena. It's on the Cyclops. It looks like he's grown up with like kind of a healthy family almost. Penelope. All opportunities, all overcome with obstacles and scrutiny, and Yeah.
Is your tramp of a mother gonna choose a new husband?
Oh.
Why don't you open her room so we can have fun with her? Don't you dare
Call my mother a tramp. Oh.
I just did. What you
What you
gonna
gonna
do
do about
about
a
it?
champ?
Somebody tell me, come and give me a sign. If I fight this monster, is it you I'll find?
That was actually I actually quite like the animation. Really, all of the details that I never would have thought about, and seeing all of the character designs, and finally getting to see how people imagine Telemachus. I guess at least personally, I've never thought about Telemachus with a very hipster vibe. Is that what people would call that? Like with all of the earrings, with more of like a kind of like a snarl on his face, almost like he kind of looks angry, like a very rebellious kid. I'm not sure that's quite how I imagine him. Let me, yeah, yeah, and with the very thick, this almost looks like makeup. I don't know what this is called. I'm too stupid when it comes to makeup stuff, but yeah, with that very dark lines around his eyes, I've never thought about him looking like this. Uh, how did I imagine him before this? Just very childish, really. So I kind of expected him to look a bit more childlike, which I guess he does. Maybe. No, not really. I mean, I guess he is 20 or 20, somewhere between 20 and 22 at this point. So he is a full grown adult now. So maybe not giving him a very childish look was a good choice. But yeah, I'm not entirely sold on this kind of a emo look. I'm not entirely sold on it. But anyway, there were some stuff.
Dreaming of all these monsters.
Yeah, he's thinking about Odysseus here.
Boy, I wish I
What is this though? Like, is this supposed to be paintings about his father's journeys? I think I've kind of seen these things before, maybe, but I've seen it with Chinese scrolls. I didn't think the Greek had these, but it's cool. I guess at this point, was everybody with Odysseus? Because again, I don't know the Greek mythology and the history, but he did name drop a lot of people in The Horse and the Infant. Who was it? Diomedes, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Teucer, Little Ajax, Nestor, Neoptolemus. Were they all also in the fleet? Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a long one because I have to read many pages from Wikipedia. So take this with maybe a little bit of grain of salt, because this is not exactly based on my own personal reading of the original stories. This is all taken from Wikipedia. Now, for the short answer is no. All of the characters that were name dropped were not part of Odysseus's fleet. They are each sort of leaders or kings of their own individual. I guess it would be more accurate to say cities. or maybe kingdoms, if that makes sense. So there's the short answer. For those of you who would like to skip ahead, you can feel free to do so, because I will have segmented this on the YouTube timeline. But for those of you who would like a little bit more information on the background of these characters, here we go. So earlier I mentioned that all of the characters that were name dropped, they were all leaders, individual leaders of their own respective kingdoms and such. All of these kingdoms allied together is called the Achaeans, or what we know today as the Greeks. They are not one unified country of Greece. Back then they were more like, I guess you can imagine them as maybe US states. They are not exactly together, and they all have their own kings and governments, if that makes sense. And they all came together to fight the kingdom of Troy in an attempt to retrieve Helen. Now, the reason why I say that the Achaeans are now known as the Greeks is because the Trojans are not Greek. They are actually located in modern-day Turkey. So now going into each of the characters themselves, we will go in order of the name dropping, starting with Diomedes. He is the king of Argos, and effectively the second strongest among the Greeks behind Achilles. Diomedes is also the youngest among the Greek kings who are part of the alliance, Athena's favorite warrior, and also led the third most number of ships to the sack of Troy, numbering at 80 ships. And famously, he is the only other Greek hero besides Heracles to have injured 2 Olympian gods as a human, and he is the only one to have injured both of those gods in a single day, those 2 gods being Ares and Aphrodite. Going over to Agamemnon, he is the king of Mycenae, and he is the overall commander of all of the Greeks. So remember I mentioned that they were all kings that came together in an alliance. Agamemnon sits at the top as the chief in command. He is also the brother of Menelaus and led the most number of ships to Troy, numbering at 100 ships. And he is also the one who recruited Odysseus and called him out on the feign of madness, which I will mention briefly in the Ithaca saga. But basically, Odysseus didn't actually want to get drafted when the recruitment was going on, and in order to avoid getting drafted, he pretended that he went mad and plowed his fields wrongly, and it's a whole story. But basically Agamemnon was the one who called out on that bluff and managed to get Odysseus to join the sack of Troy. And then part of Agamemnon's story is that once he does get back to Mycenae after the whole Trojan War thing, he ends up getting murdered by either his own cheating wife or by the wife's lover, depending on the version that you read, which either way it is tragic. Now on to his brother Menelaus. Menelaus is the king of Sparta, and once again the brother of Agamemnon. He is one of the people that Telemachus visits to ask about where Odysseus is after the Trojan War, because as we know, Odysseus doesn't come home for 10 whole years after the Trojan War, and Telemachus will leave Ithaca to try and find out where he is. Menelaus is originally married to Helen, who at the time was considered Helen of Sparta, not Helen of Troy. And the reason for that is back then, the person's name will be attributed to the kingdom or city that they were from. So originally Helen was from Sparta, and being married to the king of Sparta, she was therefore originally considered Helen of Sparta. But after the events of the Apple of Discord, which I did mention also back in The Horse and the Infant, she ends up fleeing with Paris of Troy, marries him, and then becomes the character that we know today as Helen of Troy, which is also like I mentioned in The Horse and the Infant. Helen becoming Helen of Troy is the whole catalyst to the entirety of the Trojan War. Teucer, he is the prince of this place called Salamis Island. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but yeah, he is the half brother of Ajax the Great, not to be confused with Ajax the Lesser, who does get name dropped. Teucer is a great archer among the Greeks, and then later was disowned and banished by his father after returning home, but without the body of his half brother, who ends up dying by suicide. On to little Ajax. He is or Ajax the Lesser. He is the king of Locris and led 40 ships into Troy. His specialty was in spear throwing, and also he is among the quickest within the Greek warriors, basically comparable to Achilles, who is also known for his speed. Now, his famous story is that after the sacking of Troy, he finds Cassandra inside the temple of Athena, and Cassandra was clinging onto Athena's statue, and in the process of that, little Ajax either violently drags Cassandra away from Athena's statue, or in some other versions, he straight up rapes Cassandra inside the temple of Athena, and obviously that incurred the wrath of Athena because Athena herself was one of the virgin gods. On to Nestor. He is the king of Pylos, and he's the one who leads the second most number of ships to Troy, numbering at 90 ships. And just like Menelaus, he is another one of the people that Telemachus will visit after the Trojan War. Nestor is described as a very old warrior, too old for battle at least. So instead of being more on the front lines and fighting, he instead serves more as like an advisor among the different kings that we have mentioned so far. Like basically the advisor of the council, effectively. On to the last character, who is Neoptolemus. I do go into like his story a little bit, but right now we can mention that he is the son of Achilles, and at least among the characters that we know, he is the only one who joins the Trojan War halfway, like in the middle. He wasn't there from the very beginning, and he was only a teenager when he joined the war, because during the Trojan War, the Greeks actually captured a seer from the Trojans, and that seer prophesies, one of his prophecies at least, is that the son of Achilles must join the war as part of the few things necessary for the Greeks to win against Troy. So yeah, that's why Neoptolemus gets dragged into the war. And Neo, he holds a grudge against Apollo, as in, the Olympian god Apollo. And the reason for that is because in basically every version, Apollo is the reason for the death of Achilles. Be it by the fact that Apollo guides the arrow from Paris of Troy into Achilles' heel, which ends up being the reason that Achilles died, or in some versions, Apollo is the one who directly kills Achilles. So Neoptolemus doesn't like Apollo very much.
With your story,
Yeah, stuck with your stories but no clue who you are. So yeah, Telemachus knows of the stories, so someone had to have brought them back. And the doggo!
Somebody tell me.
He does look more like a fox though. Fox? Wolf? Wolf. But big floof. Big
Come and give
floof.
me a sign.
Scratch. And look at the tongue. Right. And then you have all of the suitors here. Why did I have to listen to that again? Fuck.
There are strangers in our halls, trying to win the.
And Penelope, she looks a lot more like a man here, but yeah, this wasn't something that I necessarily had in my imagination, but it makes complete sense because she would have to be at least, at the very, very least, like 38, 39 here. So she would look quite a lot more mature. Uh, I think she would easily be in her mid 40s, maybe. I don't know when. Yeah, I don't know when Odysseus and Penelope got married, like what age they were. But yeah, considering that they already had Telemachus before Odysseus went off to the Trojan War, then yeah, it totally makes sense that she is a much older woman now. Again, I am going to assume that she is at least in like her mid 40s, roughly. So yeah, that wasn't something I thought about. And then also 108 old faces. These are the suitors. Although they do not look that old.
Faces, the
And tenuous though, that is a design that I didn't think about. And then this thing.
longer we can stall, 'cause they're getting impatient, dangerous too.
Yeah. Oh, that's an arrow. So yeah, I think I just thought that this was a very interesting visualization of everything that was going on in Ithaca while Odysseus was gone. Because again, the suitors, is it really just the suitors? I'm going to imagine it's more so like a general consensus in the whole kingdom that they are quite restless and uneasy from having no king for the last 20 whole years. And yeah, I guess in the past, having a king ruling the city and all was a very important thing. And so, since everybody clearly thinks that Odysseus is dead, they all want a chance at being the next king. And yeah, this visualization here was just really cool to like really show how hostile they're getting, like how tense the situation is back at home. Like they are effectively desecrating the throne already, with all of the swords just stabbed into the throne and also the arrows and all that stuff. So we have established that things are quite dangerous at home. Quite literally what Telemachus is saying right here. And then Athena. I have something to talk about. Why they showed Athena here in a moment when we go through the music, which means I'm gonna have to hear Telemachus going legendary. Somebody kill me.
The minutes are even severus. I know life and fate were scary, but
I wanna be legendary. You know, yeah, the song is slowly growing on me. It's not bad. It's even kind of catchy, really. but that one singular line really just puts me off. I cannot deal with it. And then we have some of the suitors with our prime villain. I actually really like his design here. He looks very scruffy almost, and then you have the eye scar, a little bit of a goatee beard with a lot of what is this? I assume that's his hair. Yeah, with all of the jewelry on the ears also, and he clearly looks very villainous. So great design. I really like it. But yeah, our favorite villain. Yes. And then all of them are in the halls. Boy. Also, the eye. The eye. I guess that makes sense. He does have the eye scar, so I assume his right eye here is blind. Probably. And yeah, we find out why he's the villain. To put it lightly. What do you do there?
I just did.
He's just gonna casually push the sword aside. And yeah, I like this last part also. If I fight this monster, and then who they cut to? Who they cut to? You have a monster back at home as well, in a very different sense of the meaning. I cannot wait until we get to his song. We are still quite far away, but alright, let's go back and listen out for the musical stuff. Let's go. I believe this is Telemachus's instrument. I've seen Jorge call it the indie piano. I'm not sure if that's like an actual instrument or like an actual sound. But for me, what does it sound like? I almost wanted to say that it sounds like the Celesta because it, I don't know, it definitely does have some piano qualities to it. But the Celesta, I want to say it sounds more like bells. There are a couple of piano-ish instruments that I'm not too familiar with the sound of. Yeah, in my mind, I think it sounds most like a Celesta, at least, according to what I'm most familiar with.
It's just me, myself.
We had like out of all of the instruments that came in, I'm not sure what those other ones are. They sound kind of synthetic to me, but that's a very standout instrument. Here, acoustic guitar. I'm gonna see if there are strings also.
It's just me, myself, and I. Stuck in my bedroom, living in this world you left behind. Dreaming of all these monsters that I'll never get to fight. But boy, I wish I could, so I could.
Yep, they are there. So, notice that I brought up specifically the guitar and the strings. Specifically, legato strings. because if you listen to the background over here,
world you left behind, dreaming of all these monsters that I'll never get to fight. But boy, I wish I could, so I could bring the world.
yep, the strings are playing legato. So, remember back in, I believe it was the Circe saga, when we were talking about the differentiation between the string instruments used for Circe and used for Penelope. For Penelope, her instrument mainly is the viola, but also the entire like string section backing her up plays legato, which again, if any of you are not familiar, legato just means that the notes are more connected. So if we take those notes together, they will be played more like the notes flow into each other, they connect, there's no break in between. Whereas for Circe, it's played staccato, which is more bouncy, it's much shorter, it's more cut off. That is staccato. So we have Telemachus's own instrument, the Celesta-like thing that we heard in the beginning, and then for him we also have the acoustic guitar and the legato strings. Why is that? It's because he is the son of Penelope and Odysseus, whose instruments are the legato strings and the acoustic guitar. Both of them back him up because they are his parents. And Telemachus also has his own instrument, kind of signifying that he is also his own person. But in the context of, the relationships, the music tells us that he is related to Penelope and Odysseus, which is really, really cool.
Get to fight. But boy, I wish I could, so I could bring the world some light. Cause I'm stuck with your stories, but no clue who you are. And no idea if you're dead or just too far. Somebody
Tell me.
come and give me a sign. If I fight those
Did you guys hear that in the background? Using Telemachus's instrument?
come and give me a sign. If I fight
Yeah, I think those are the notes. That is whose theme? Athena. She is watching Telemachus. It's a very, very subtle thing. And I found it quite interesting that they use Telemachus's instrument, but I guess technically, because Telemachus's instrument is again named the indie piano, they are technically both pianos, so it works. But the most important thing is you can hear Athena's motif. I probably got some notes wrong, but it's there.
those monsters, is it you I'll find? If so, then give me
Sirens and the Cyclops.
give me giants and a hydra. I know life and fate are scary, but I wanna be legendary. I'll fight the harpies and chimera's. The minutes are
And yeah, just the
life and fate are scary, but I wanna be legendary.
I hate it. Can you guys hear how I just cringe at that one line consistently? But yeah, I just kind of wanted to point out how the fandom is not wrong in calling him a Disney princess. I mean, to be fair, Uh, he probably has really heard a lot about Odysseus, and like he grew up with a very different life, clearly, mostly being stuck on the island and specifically at home. I assume he can roam about, but like he mostly doesn't have much of a reason to, and so he grew up quite sheltered compared to Odysseus, as far as I'm aware. And so yeah, he starts to have all of these dreams about the adventures outside, making a name for himself and everything, which is I would say it's quite a common kind of imagination that young men will have. I will admit that I have thought about adventures myself.
Strangers in our halls, trying to win the heart of my mom, but she is standing tall.
And yes, we also get the thing about the suitors. This is the first mention. They are not. Eh? Wait, is this the first mention? No, the first mention of it would be in No Longer You at the very end. Kill all the suitors for love. So yeah, they're not explicitly named here, but we do get an idea that these are the suitors, and they are trying to marry Penelope to be the next king. Like I mentioned earlier, the whole situation in Ithaca with, having no king for 2 whole decades, that is quite a big thing. We can even kind of relate it to ourselves, where in the modern society, imagine just having no president for 20 whole years. I mean, I guess, in a sense, you can say that the situation is kind of like having no president and only the vice president who is unwilling to go up to being the president, and also unwilling to let anyone be the president. There's gonna be a lot of confusion. There's gonna be a lot of, I guess, rumors about the vice president, really, just speculation about why they're not going up to be the president themselves, or why they're not letting anyone be the president, and all that kind of stuff. So it is actually quite amazing that the kingdom is still standing after 20 years without a king.
108 old faces, the men who call me small. They keep taking space.
Telemachus does look really small, actually. I didn't notice that. Like, look at that. He's barely at chest level with Antinous. Although, to be fair, Antinous could just be a really big guy. But yeah, the story has really depicted Telemachus as being quite a small boy and kind of timid also. More timid, helpless, doesn't know how to fight. Yeah.
Who call me small. They keep taking space and it's not much.
So it makes sense that the fandom calls him the Disney princess.
Dangerous too.
Yeah, and here he also says the suitors are getting impatient and dangerous. They want the throne to themselves.
Damn, if I was half as strong as you. Somebody help me. Come and give me the strength.
And then now in the animatics, Athena shows up. Because again, in the music itself earlier on, we have established that Athena is actually present somewhere doing something, but she is present here.
Can I do whatever it takes to keep my mom safe? If so, then give me sirens
And then again, the whole thinking about all the adventures, thinking about being strong, having the strength to really just do anything that he wants.
Wanna be legendary. I'll fight the heartbeats and chimeras. The minutes or even Sarah's. I know life
Life and fate is scary, but I wanna be legendary. Where is he? Where is the man who left you to wife? Oh. And yeah, Penelope, the literal queen. She looks so angry here, but rightfully so. With all of the. I mean, I can imagine that she knows exactly how the suitors look at her. Like, basically, some kind of prize. Which I am going to assume that the ancient Greek is still mostly a patriarchy. So, meaning that the men generally have more power, more social status, that kind of stuff, and women are more subservient to the men, kind of thing. Yeah, the suitors really just more or less see her as a prize, uh, something to be taken, really. So, yeah, I feel bad for her, especially because this has been adapted to a more modern audience, which is us in present day 2025. Uh, so all the more reason to kind of feel bad for her. Um, it is awesome that she has been able to keep all of the suitors at bay for 20 whole years. I mean, I would assume like the first 10 years was pretty easy because I think they more or less knew that the Trojan War was still going on. So, they they had an idea that the king is still alive and kicking ass. So they had no reason to really rebel against the throne. But slowly after that, with the crew slowly returning one by one, but the king isn't, and nobody knows where he is, it is quite natural to assume that he is dead. So, yeah, again, everybody is trying to aim for the throne and trying to take Penelope.
it's been 20 years and we still have no king. Give me a chance to sing.
And also, something that I am a little bit curious about, because Odysseus did get crowned to be a king when he looks quite young. Again, I don't know the actual age, uh, but Odysseus did get crowned as the king when he was quite young, as we saw in Warrior of the Mind. So I am kind of wondering why it is that Telemachus isn't seen as the heir to the king, and rather Penelope has to marry someone else to be the king to then hand down to Telemachus. I just thought that was a little bit strange. Unless, which we have kind of seen Telemachus's character in this song, it does look like he is relatively timid and more of like a rebellious. Like he still has this rebellious face. No, maybe not. Because he does think about his mom a lot and protecting her and all that. But I guess in general, he doesn't seem very reliable. So nobody sees him as the next king, and they just kind of view him as simply the prince. Yeah. But again, I just thought I would point that out because I would assume that normally Telemachus would be quite naturally the next king, and considering that he is basically a full grown adult now also. So yeah, it could just be that he is single. because the king always needs a queen, right? And it would be weird if Penelope was Telemachus's queen. So yeah.
Single opportunity, and I'll overcome these obstacles and scrutiny. And boy, when's your tramp of a mother gonna choose a new husband? Why don't you open her room so we can have fun with?
Yeah, and Antinuous's. Well, I'm not gonna say that this is his instrument, but he has a synth bass backing him up. Because I thought only the gods have synthetic instruments. Although I guess, you know, Athena has a real piano, Poseidon has a real trumpet. They don't necessarily sound very synthetic to me. Maybe it's just a general rule, perhaps.
Boy, when's your tramp of a mother gonna choose a new
Yeah,
husband?
it sounds like a saw wave
Why
to
don't
me.
you open her room so we can have fun with her? Don't you dare call my mother a tramp.
Because it's very buzzy.
I just did. What you gonna do about it, champ? Somebody tell me, come and give me a sign. If I fight this monster, is it you I'll find?
Yeah, and they're gonna throw hands. So yeah, that was it for Legendary, where we get introduced to Telemachus. You know, we see Penelope again, and we get to see the suitors, and just the general state of Odysseus's hometown.